Vladimir Yakunin, former senior KGB officer who served a stint undercover at the United Nations in New York, then joined with Kovalchuk in taking over Bank Russia. Putin anointed him chief of the state railways monopoly. The family. The coterie of relatives, officials and businessmen closely surrounding the first Russian president, Boris Yeltsin. Valentin Yumashev, former journalist who gained Yeltsin's trust while writing his memoirs and was anointed Kremlin chief of staff in 1997, married Yeltsin's daughter Tatiana in 2002. Tatiana Dyachenko, Yeltsin's daughter who officially served as his image advisor but was essentially gatekeeper to the president. Boris Berezovsky, former mathematician who made his fortune running trading schemes for car maker Avto VAZ, the producer of the boxy Zhiguli car that epitomized the Soviet era, and inveigled his way into the good graces of Yeltsin and his family. When he acquired the Sibneft oil major, he became the epitome of the intensely politically wired oligarchs of the Yeltsin era. Alexander Voloshin, former economist who started out working with Berezovsky on privatizations and other schemes, and was transferred to the Kremlin in 1997 to work as Yumashev's deputy chief of staff, promoted to chief of staff in 1999. Roman Abramovich, oil trader who became Berezovsky's protégé and later outmaneuvered him to take over Berezovsky's business empire, cashier to the Yeltsin family and then to Putin. Sergei Pugachev, Russian Orthodox banker who was a master of the Byzantine financing schemes of Yeltsin's Kremlin and then became known as Putin's banker too. Co-founder of Mezprombank, he straddled the worlds of the family and the Siloviki. The Yeltsin-era oligarch who crossed Putin's men. Mikhail Khodorkovsky, former member of the Communist Youth League, who became one of Russia's first and most successful businessmen of the Perestroika era and the 1990s. The mobsters, foot soldiers for the KGB. St. Petersburg. Ilya Traber, former Soviet submariner who became a black market antiques trader in the Perestroika years, and then an intermediary between Putin's security services and the Tambov organized crime group, controlling St. Petersburg's most strategic assets, the seaport and the oil terminal. Vladimir Kumarin, Tambov organized crime boss who lost an arm in an assassination attempt and became known as St. Petersburg's night governor, joining in business with Putin's men, most notably with Ilya Traber. Moscow. Semyon Mogilevich, former wrestler, known as the Brainy Don, who at the end of the 80s became banker to the leaders of Russia's most powerful organized crime groups, including the Solntsevskaya, funneling cash into the West and setting up a criminal empire of drugs and arms trafficking of his own. Recruited in the 70s by the KGB, he was the criminal arm of the Russian state. Sergei Mikhailov, head of the Solntsevskaya organized crime group, Moscow's most powerful, with close ties to many of the KGB-connected businessmen who later cultivated connections with New York property mogul Donald Trump. Vyacheslav Ivankov, Yaponchik, mobster dispatched by Mogilevich to Brighton Beach, New York, to oversee the Solntsevskaya's criminal empire there. Yevgeny Dvoskin, Brighton Beach mobster who became one of Russia's most notorious shadow bankers, after moving back to Moscow with his uncle Ivankov, joining forces with the Russian security services to funnel tens of billions of dollars in black cash into the West. Felix Sater, Dvoskin's best friend since childhood, became a key business partner of the Trump Organization, developing a string of properties for Trump, all the while retaining high-level contacts in Russian intelligence. Prologue. Moscow Rules. It was late in the evening in May 2015, and Sergei Pugachev was flicking through an old family photo album he'd found from 13 years ago or more. In one photo from a birthday party at his Moscow dacha, his son Victor keeps his eyes downcast as Vladimir Putin's daughter smiles and whispers in his ear. In another, Victor and his other son Alexander are posing on a wooden spiral staircase in the Kremlin presidential library with Putin's two daughters. At the edge of the photo, Lyudmila Putina, then still the Russian president's wife, smiles. We were sitting in the kitchen of Pugachev's latest residence, a 3-story townhouse in the well-heeled London area of Chelsea. The late evening light...